Good evening and welcome to The Right Side, the show where we talk about today's news, views, trends, and opinions from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and this evening we're joined by Evan Sayet. He's an author, a stand-up comedian, a screenwriter, and a repeat offender. He's been on the show before. It's been about a year and a half, but Evan, welcome back.
Well, thanks, and I do a lot, don't I?
You do get around.
Right. You know, what's really great about that is it's sort of a double-edged sword. I can write in almost any format that I find appropriate. So if something's a joke, I can write it as a joke. If something's a sitcom, I can write it as a sitcom. If it's a script, a screenplay, whatever. So I'm able to bring my thoughts to paper and to sell it in almost any aspect, including my book. But because I'm a jack of all trades in that way, you never become the guy in any of them. So when somebody's an idea for a documentary, they don't say, get Evan Sayet, they say, get Ken Burns. Conversely, though, if I have an idea for a documentary, like my 2-hour documentary for the Discovery Channel, which was the highest rated special in their entire history. This is true. For about a decade, my documentary on the 1970s, I wanted to call it, remember back then they had When Animals Attack? I wanted to call mine the 70s, When Decades Attack. But they wouldn't let me do that. It ended up being called, I'm so embarrassed by this title, From Bell Bottoms to Boogie Shoes. But it was the highest rated special in Discovery Channel's history for about a decade until it was finally beaten out by a documentary about midgets.
From bell bottoms to the vertically challenged.
There you go.
So it just seems that success follows you, because the last time you were on the show, we somehow got translated into Hebrew, flipped around backwards, and have ended up being kind of an internet sensation on Facebook, at least.
In Israel.
In Israel.
Right. And how did this happen? I mean, again, not to be disparaging about it, but of all the TV shows that one does, this one here in Silicon Valley, somebody found it. I'm very pro-Israel, and our conversation was about Israel. And somebody in Israel found it, translated it, and it's now got 165,000 views, which in the tiny nation of Israel is substantial.
It's huge. So the question is, did they send you stats on conversions to conservatism after you unleashed on the liberal mindset? You
know, it's funny because they actually are converting to conservatism in Israel. There's almost no Labor Party there any longer. So they've become wiser, and partly because they're on the front lines against Islamic fascism, while we're still able to be stupid and not suffer defeat. We suffer great loss, great casualties we saw in Orlando, but nonetheless, they seem to have gotten wiser there quicker than we have here.
And should we attribute that to your interview here? Would that be, we've changed the world in some small way?
Look, I think of it, I think of all of these things like an atomic bomb and critical mass. You never know which atom. It's inert, it's inert, it's inert, and then one atom changes everything, and now you've got an explosion. So maybe it was our atom.
That would be awesome.
And yeah.
So, and that was based on your book, The Kindergarten of Eden, and why liberals think that the way that they do. Have they changed much over the last 2.5 years?
No, they've only solidified in both their thinking and, unfortunately, in their power and in their excesses. I mean, we have a president of the United States who does not mind lying about a situation in Ferguson, Missouri. He knew Michael Brown's hands weren't up. He knew that this drug-addled career criminal had tried to murder a policeman. If he were a good person, he would have taken to the bully pulpit and told the American people this was not a case of racism. Instead, he lied in order to incite the kinds of violence that we now have.
So let's take a step back, though.
I can't. I'm okay.
Oh, yeah, don't fall off the stage.
Yeah.
No, the question
liability.
is, people might think you've always been this way. You've always had this kind of, some might term an anti-liberal bias. But you actually used to be one. Yeah,
I grew up a New York City-born liberal Jew. My liberalism wasn't intellectual. It wasn't that I had read Das Kapital or read Saul Alinsky and compared it to arguments from the right. It was just what my friend Andrew Breitbart would call the default factory setting for somebody born into that demographic. I mean, growing up in New York as a Jew, I knew what all liberals know. I know that liberals are good and conservatives are evil. I knew I was good, so I must be a liberal.
So what brought you to the dark side?
You know, I call myself a 9/13 Republican. A lot of people call themselves 9/11 Republicans. 9/11 didn't change me. 9/11 didn't surprise me. Right? Obviously, I didn't know the date. I didn't know the targets. The carnage sickened me. But even then, as a brain-dead liberal, I knew just enough about the world to know that the same people who were murdering the Jews of Israel for no other reason they were the closest infidels, who were murdering Hindus in India for no other reason they were the closest infidels, who were murdering Buddhists in Afghanistan for no other reason they were the closest infidels, would, when they could make their way across those oceans, come and kill the big infidel. Of course they would come and massacre the great Satan if and when they could. No, so it wasn't 9/11 that surprised me. It's what I metaphorically call 9/12. Right? That's the days and the weeks and the months and now the years after 9/11 and the liberal response to the attacks. The idea that we deserved them? That it was, in the words of the spiritual mentor of our president, Jeremiah Wright, the chickens coming home to roost? And that the way to prevent further attacks was to be nicer to the terrorists? This was insane to me. And, liberals, we were supposed to hate religious fanaticism. And yet you heard these liberals defending the Islamic fascists and lying about Americans, the most secular people, the people of New York City, that they deserved it. This was just insane to me. And so I began to think, if that's how liberals think on this issue, how do they think on other issues? And Chris, I have an expression. The first time you think is the last time you're a Democrat.
I had a similar experience in my conversion away from the Democrat Party. But tell us more. I mean, what has your research shown? What drives the mindset of passivism, of these other things that you discovered in your journey?
Yeah, look, it's complex, which is why it's an entire book. And there are really actually three kinds of modern liberals. There's the true believer. And the true believer believes that if we can eliminate the recognition of right and wrong, better and worse, truth and lies, if we can eliminate all comparisons, we'll eliminate all war. After all, if nothing's better than anything else, if your religion's not better than my religion, then why would we war? If your country's not better than my country, why would we war? So they believe that their job is to tear down the recognition of the better and elevate in esteem and stature well, let's just say the stature, because I'm not finding the right word, of the lesser until everything meets in the middle and there's nothing to disagree about. Because if we don't disagree, then we won't fight. If we won't fight, then we won't go to war. Without war, there'll be no poverty. Without poverty, there'll be no crime. Without crime, there'll be no injustice. It's a utopian ideology, and all that's required to usher in this utopia is to eliminate all fact, reason, logic, truth, beauty, all the things that we use to try to recognize what is better and then work on its behalf.
So how do they add for the variable where there are humans who may not be playing by those rules and still think they're better than others?
Right. I'm not sure I get the question, so try it again.
No, well, I mean, so this is all fine if everyone's playing by the same rules, but as humans, we tend to want to get ahead. Sure, sometimes it's self-serving or other things.
Well, but I think what you're saying is in the real world, the better does exist. And because the better exists and because it proves itself, it becomes successful because it is the better, whether it's the better constitution, whether it's the better religion. What the liberal has to do is, while he wants to make everything appear to meet in the middle, because the better exists, he has to attack the better. And when you get to the exceptional, how does he explain America's exceptional strength, America's exceptional prosperity, if we're nothing special as a nation? The only possible answer is, not only is our success unfair, why should we be successful if we're nothing special, but given that we are the most successful nation in all of human history, we have to be the biggest injustice ever. So they don't make everything meet in the middle. What they do is they flip-flop good and evil, right and wrong, so that this is why they despise Israel. It's not because Israel is the worst nation on the planet. It's because Israel is one of the best nations on the planet, as proved by their symphony orchestras, their skyscrapers, their Nobel Prize-winning physicists, all the things that their better culture has led them to achieve. That leads the modern liberal, who's so open-minded, nothing's better than anything else, to not only see Israel's success as unjust, but because they are exceptionally successful, they must be an exceptional injustice. Yeah.
And so when you can't explain it, you just apologize for it and try to shred it.
That's exactly right. You have to apologize. Look, if our Constitution is nothing special, if our Judeo-Christian heritage is nothing special, and by the way, the President of the United States was asked this. He said, he was asked, do you believe in American exceptionalism? And he gave a very clever, very politic answer in which he said, yes, I do. and then made very clear he meant no, I don't. What he said was, yes, I believe in American exceptionalism, just as I'm sure the Greeks believe in Greek exceptionalism and the Brits believe in British exceptionalism. In other words, he doesn't believe America is exceptional because of our unique constitution, our Judeo-Christian heritage, our Protestant work ethic. He just thinks America is exceptional because he lives here and he roots for the home team. If he lived in Great Britain, he would think they were exceptional. If he lived in Greece, he would think Greece was exceptional. But here's the problem. If America isn't special, if our culture and we didn't earn our success, then one, our success is unjust. And two, how do they then go about proving that injustice? They have to make up lies. So they'll say America is imperialist. We got our success because we stole it from other countries. Well, the reality is America is the least imperialist major power in all of human history. Think about this. When England was the world's only superpower, they tried to take over the world. The sun never set on the British Empire. Right? When Japan was the world's only superpower, they tried to take over the world. When France and Napoleon was the world's only superpower, when Germany and Hitler was the world's only superpower, they tried to take over the world. After World War II, all right, our factories were running at full bore. Because of those oceans, our land was pristine. Asia was in ashes. Europe was decimated. Africa was, as always, a non-starter. Islam was, as always, primitive. And we held in our hand a weapon where we could have gone to any nation around the world and said, we're taking you over or we're going to use this. And not only didn't we take over the world, Chris, we didn't even take over Canada.
Or Mexico.
Or Mexico, right? And by the way, I have proof that it's the liberals, not the conservatives, who are racists. How come every time they say, if that racist Republican wins, I'm moving, they say I'm moving to Canada? What's wrong with Mexico? Right, how come every time they want to turn America into a foreign country, it's always Sweden, the whitest country in the world? It's because they're racists.
Well, and not only that, looking at the policies and everything else, they bring race to the forefront nearly every time. If we look at what's happening right now.
There's a reason for it. And one of them is, I mean, it's such a central point in my book, and I borrow it from Alan Bloom in The Closing of the American Mind. He says, the opposite of indiscriminateness is the evil of having discriminated. Thinking is an act of bigotry. Right? Own to the liberal the act of thought, because your thoughts are so tainted by the fact that you're white, that you're black, that you're tall, that you're short, that you're rich, that you're poor, that you're a woman, that you're a man, that you're transgender. Anything you think is so tainted by your prejudices that the only way not to be a bigot is to never think at all. All right? It's indiscriminateness, and the opposite of indiscriminateness is discrimination. That's why everything you say, it's why that placard that I see at the Tea Party gatherings, it doesn't matter what this sign says, they'll still say it's racist. It doesn't matter, because as long as there's an idea on it, that's proof positive that you're discriminating.
Yeah, horrible thing.
Right? Discriminating thought is an act of bigotry to the left.
Yeah, so instead of think, comply. That should you have the freedom to comply.
And let's be clear about something. There's a vital difference between intellect and what I'll call intellectualizing. Right? Intellect, for the purposes of this conversation, is the use of one's mind to ascertain the right and rightful answer.
You can't have a right answer. That's discriminatory.
Okay, so intellectualizing is the use of your mind to conjure a clever explanation for what is already believed. All right, so you and I would say, is America imperialist? And we would look at the fact that we are not imperialists. The liberals say America is imperialist and then make up whatever storyline they need. Or Americans are racist. America is the least racist civilization in all of human history by far and away. So when they can't find any racism, what's the first thing they do is they lie about it.
And then they create it.
And so what they will do, and look how, because one of the corollaries in my book is that modern liberal policies occur in tandem. Every effort to denigrate the good, right, and successful is met with an equal and opposite effort to elevate in esteem and stature the evil, failed, and wrong. Right? So they will say we're racist, but they can't use our own words, so they'll say it's dog whistle. No human being can actually hear our racism. It's dog whistle. But then when you have an Islamist murderer call 911, they will change the wording and redact the transcript so that what he actually said they changed to be better, what we actually said they changed to be worse.
And so, question, so if, let's say a sniper who happens to be black calls and says, or talks to the police and says, my objective was to kill white people, is that racist, or is that just the plight of the minority.
Or maybe the gun just went off by itself.
They do that.
That's a possibility as well. Yeah, look, the idea is that the liberal needs for America to be racist, because if we're not racist, then you have to ask, why is the black community not achieving at the same rate as the other ethnicities in America?
Liberal policies?
Since it can't be anything that culture does, because all cultures are equal, so it can't be that the rap music, gangster rap, might be a bad influence. It can't be that fathers are important because a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. All right, so it can't be anything that the black community does. So then the only thing that's left is it has to be oppression. But they can't find oppression. They can't find aggression. So, this is something I'm going to talk about in my speech tonight. But one of the tricks liberals use is they insert a modifier before a concept that changes the concept 180 degrees, because they're always wrong. So, for example, since the modern liberal is never correct, you and I know how important it is to be correct in your facts, correct in your thinking, correct in your reasoning, correct in your conclusion. But the modern liberal is never correct, so he inserts the modifier politically correct, and it changes the meaning of the word 180 degrees. The modern liberal detests the notion of individual justice. So they insert the modifier social before the word justice, and they spin it 180 degrees. And the reason I bring this up is because they need for there to be aggression against the black community. Because if there's not, then the black community's problems are of their own making. And since there are no actual aggressions, they insert the modifier micro, and it means exactly the opposite of an actual aggression. So, by the way, our racism is so small you can't hear it. It's dog whistle. And it's so small you can't see it. You need a microscope.
And so when a flick becomes a punch and everything else, that's where you're going with the microaggression type of issue.
You don't have the actual aggression, so you have the microaggression, which, by the way, you don't even need the microaggression. You just need something that might trigger the microaggression. And by the time you're down here, it's so been intellectualized, right, but it's just not true.
So apply this to real life and what's happening.
I just did.
No, I mean, as far as, we've got this movement that's going on right now. We've got people...
Which Black Lives Matter. Which, of course, is a misnomer intentionally, because everything the modern liberal says is the exact opposite of the truth. If Black Lives Matter, they'd be even more supportive of the police who keep their neighborhoods safe. If Black Lives mattered to them, they'd be far more concerned about the black-on-black murders that are multiple of anything that a black or white cop does to the black community. So this, like the environmental movement, like the women's movement, they're just words that the left uses to act as fig leaves, to give noble purpose to their ignoble causes.
Well, and even if you look at the fact
that... no, well worded.
Yeah, well...
Let's try it again. Right?
Yeah, facts and such. I have friends that fight heavily within the black community to raise awareness of abortion, for example, because more blacks are aborted in New York City than are born.
Right.
And that's where their thing is if Black Lives Matter, why are we allowing all of this murder, all of this genocide to occur?
And even that is a misnomer. The nomer, well, then my New York came out, Noma.
That's spelled with an A?
But they're not pro-choice. The modern liberal and the Democratic Party is pro-abortion. And proof of the pudding is twofold. One of the reasons they are is because of the money. The abortion doctors make more money the more abortions that are had.
And then you can sell parts.
Kick it back, and they can sell body parts, and then you kick it back to the Democratic Party through contributions, so they make laws that keep abortions out. But do you know that in many, many, many places, they don't even inspect abortion clinics?
Sure.
Right? Because they do not want the truth about how filthy some of those places are.
Right.
All right? So when we talk about choice, the Democrats aren't pro-choice. The Democrats are pro-abortion. I can prove this to you in one fact. For many, many, many years, at least since Roe v. Wade, the Democratic Party's official platform, their official policy, was they want abortions to be safe, legal, and rare. The last election, what would it be, 2012, they eliminated the word rare. The Democratic Party now officially does not want abortions to be rare. Well, even if you are pro-choice, you at least have to recognize you want them to be rare. You want them to be rare because they're costly. You want them to be rare. I mean, even if you don't believe that it's murder, you want them to be rare because many are botched and women are hurt. All right. So the fact that the Democratic Party officially wants abortions as plentiful as often as possible, right there, now you need to make the choice about whether you are pro-life or pro-death, because it's not pro-life or pro-choice.
So you were talking about things like elections and Democrat Party and everything else. We just had major news in the last week about Hillary Clinton being let off by the FBI. And many within the Democrat Party don't care that she's been under investigation. Help us understand that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, to the left, there is nothing that is sacred, and there is nothing that is beyond the pale. There is nobody that they care about. Everything is for, well, to use David Horowitz's phrase, everything is for the revolution. All right, so they don't care that Hillary Clinton is corrupt so long as she'll promote the leftist ideology. There is no morality to the Democratic Party. There is nothing that is beyond the pale. There is no act of criminality so long as it's committed by a D that is just something they will not suffer.
And so do you think there will be ramifications in the courts of public opinion, or do you think that she still has a shot at getting elected even through all of this?
Well, I think the answer is both. I think there will be ramifications, and I'm not sure if they'll be great enough to swing the election, especially because the Republican candidate is so flawed. You know, it's stunning. Unfortunately, the way that I describe my choices here are, it's a choice between somebody putting a fully loaded gun to my head and pulling the trigger, that's Hillary, or being forced to play Russian roulette, that's Trump. I believe anybody it's just obvious, you play Russian roulette. Right? You take your chances rather than knowing, because 4 more years of liberals destroying this country, 4 more years of open borders, 4 more years of TB-infected refugees being dropped off. And by the way, if Barack Obama really cared about the refugees, he would inform the governor, he would coordinate with the mayor, and of course you do, to make sure it's as easy and safe a transference as possible. Why is Obama keeping where they are a secret? It's because he doesn't care about the American people. He cares about advancing his globalist ideals and undermining the Western civilization that he thinks is the greatest injustice in human history.
So we've only got a couple of minutes left, but the question is, do you see a solution given the state of the affairs in the country?
One thing that Thomas Sowell so wisely, I mean, everything he says is wise, but the recognition that it's the left that seeks solutions, it's the right that seeks to ameliorate. The idea that government or anything can solve poverty, can solve hunger, can solve these things is just not the way we think. So it's incremental. We need to ameliorate to make things better at every turn through our policies. And there's got to be a drastic change, because right now they own the media, they own the schools, they own the universities, they own the entertainment industry, and they steal elections. All right? That's a really powerful thing to try to overcome. And one mistake that we have made is we are so convinced, and rightly so, that we are so obviously and overwhelmingly correct on everything, on every issue across the board, that all we have to do is explain it logically to our friends. But when you've been indoctrinated from the kindergarten, that's why it's called the kindergarten of Eden, how the modern liberal thinks, from kindergarten through junior high school, college, graduate school, postgraduate school, and then in your industry, if it's entertainment, journalism, academia, or Democratic Party governance, it's really hard to just convince the other person. At some point, I fear, there's a hierarchy, that's not the right word, there's a progression of ways that people can seek to redress their rightful grievances. It used to be you did so at the ballot box, but you can't do that now because Democrats steal elections. Well, it used to be you would go to the media and draw attention to it, but you can't do that now because the media is ideologically corrupt. It used to be then maybe you went to the courts, but you can't now because the courts reject the Constitution and are activist, pro-liberal when they are. Right. So the next places that you go are protests. But we did protest. We had 1 million people, and all they did was call us racists. The next place is civil disobedience. And after that, there's violence. That's all there's left to us, is civil disobedience and violence.
Well, and obviously we don't want to see things go there.
That's correct.
We appreciate you sharing your passion, but we've run out of time. So is there a website where people can reach you?
Of course. It's Evan Sayet, EVAN, S as in Sam, AYET.com.
Thanks, Evan. If you hold on for just a moment, we'll be back after a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum.
Some people think that a meeting of conservatives in Silicon Valley could fit in a small room. In fact, when the Conservative Forum was founded in 2003, we did meet in a small room, a coffee shop in San Jose. It doesn't get more grassroots than this. It may surprise you that there are thousands of people right here in Silicon Valley who share your principles of liberty, free markets, and limited government. Since our humble beginnings in that coffee shop, we've outgrown 3 meeting halls. From San Jose to Gilroy to Mill Valley, we bring hundreds of people together each month from all over the Bay Area to promote the principles of American liberty. How do we do it? It starts with a stellar lineup of speakers. Speakers like Steve Forbes, Senator Jim DeMint, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Lieutenant Colonel Alan West, Andrew Breitbart, Pamela Geller, and many others. These speakers passionately articulate our shared principles and remind us why conservatism isn't just the smart choice, it's also the moral choice. Our monthly meetings are only one dimension of the forum. We underwrite The Right Side, a monthly television show on cable access channel KMVT. We also host a monthly Constitution discussion group and provide tables at our meetings for more than a dozen local groups who share our love of liberty to promote their specific cause. The Conservative Forum is the premier place in Silicon Valley for conservatives to gather, become invigorated, motivated, and empowered. We welcome guests to our monthly meetings and offer special discounted pricing to first-time visitors. Take a look at our speaker lineup in the coming months and join us to learn why we say liberty is made in America.
And welcome back to The Right Side. That was a word from our underwriters, the Conservative Forum. And while we appreciate them immensely for making this show possible, this is now the 5th season, what they're best known for is their speaker series. That happens the second Tuesday of each month at 7 o'clock, about 3 minutes from here at 432 Stearland Road at the IFES Portuguese Hall. And the reason we were blessed with having Evan with us in the studio this evening is he'll be speaking there shortly. In August, Mr. McCarthy, best-selling author, contributing editor, and a frequent guest and commentator at Fox News, will be our guest. In September, Cam Edwards, host of NRA News Cam and Company, and co-author of Heavy Lifting, Get a Job, Get Up, Get a Job, Start a Family, and Other Manly Advice, will be speaking. And if you'd like more information about what's happening at the forum, you can go to theconservativeforum.com. In closing this evening, Evan is a brilliant thinker, has a lot to say, and unfortunately we were limited on the time that he could share with us this evening. But many people, after watching our last show and just following him generally, have found a lot of wisdom in the Kindergarten of Eden, but also in just the speeches that he gives and the perspective he brings to society. So if you get a chance, look him up at Evan Sayet, EvanSayet.com for more information. We've appreciated having you with us this evening. We look forward to seeing you again on the show or in person sometime in the near future. But if you just can't wait, reach out to us at therightsidetv@gmail.com and we'll get your questions answered, put out the flaming darts, whatever you have to send at us. Thanks again, and have a great night.